Hi, my name is Aya. You're watching Aya Reads, and I'm here to talk about the last 10 books I read. These videos are going to be instead of my wrap-up videos. I just found that it's kind of difficult for me to film and upload monthly wrap-ups in the time I want them since I work full-time. So I only film on the weekends, and obviously I don't control when the first of the month is or the last of the month, and I only want to actually wrap up books for my monthly wrap-ups that I read in that month. So it just, scheduling wise, it didn't really work for me, and I feel like this will give me a little bit more leeway and a little bit more flexibility. Hopefully that's okay for you. Let me know in the comments what you think of this new style of wrapping my books up, because I do want to talk about each and every book I read. I just like that. I like watching that, and therefore I want to do it myself still. And let me know if you enjoy stats, when do you want me to do them? Right now I was thinking maybe after every quarter or something. Or if you're not interested in stats, let me know that too, so then I know that I don't have to do that. So like always with my wrap-ups, I'm going to talk about these books in order of enjoyment. So I'll start off with my lowest rated book, working my way up to my highest rated book. So I had 1 DNF, 1 3-star read, 5 4-star reads, and 3 5-star reads. No 0.5 stars this time, so let's get started with my DNF, which was Between Friends and Lovers. This one actually pains me that I DNF'd it because it sounded interesting, and it's obviously a diverse book, but I just knew it was teetering on like 2 stars, and I also didn't really want to do that since I wasn't really enjoying this. So this is by Charlene Obobi, and this deals with a pining heroine, which, if you know anything about me, I love a good pining heroine trope. I just do. I eat that shit up. And this is about Jo, who is a doctor, but now mainly she doesn't really work at a hospital or anything. She is like a doctor influencer. She has had a crush on her best friend for years. She's basically family. But like I said, she has had a giant crush on him. One night, everything kind of explodes. She sort of tells him that she loves him, and he kind of does some shitty things. So she decides to step away from him and start pursuing this other guy, Ezra. No, Ezra is the friend, Malcolm. Malcolm is this sweet, soft author type, and he is basically a simp for her, and she is kind of sort of interested in him, but also still has feelings for her best friend, so it's all very complicated. I was reading this in between my vlog reading BookTube's favorite romances, because my plan was to actually, because this was one of the more popular diverse romances, so I thought I had the time to read both the top 15 plus some diverse romances. I didn't, and since I didn't find myself really gravitating towards this book, I just decided to DNF, because this was going towards a not balanced relationship. Like, I already felt like it wasn't balanced. And if you know anything about me, you know I tend to struggle with those books because I want the majority of the book to be balanced. I just didn't really understand why he loved her so much, aside from the fact that they had this what's that called when you really think you know and love an influencer? Parasocial? No. Maybe. Yeah. Because they used to talk to each other all the time since he was like one of her biggest fans. So I get why he thinks he knows her, but does he really? You know what I mean? So it wasn't really that clear to me why he was so obsessed this fast. I mean, it does explain it, like it's part of his personality. It just, I couldn't really get it from this book. And I don't know, to me it was clear that it felt to me like she was using him to get over her best friend, and I just don't like those kinds of stories. So I was like 100%, like if I had read this at any other point, I might have finished it, but I don't know if it would have gotten a higher rating. So I just decided to DNF it, because I hadn't picked this book up for like 6 days, and at that point I just cut my losses and dipped out. Then my 1 3-star read, I actually vlogged. So if you want to know my full non-spoilery thoughts, check out the vlog, but it's Phantom by H.D. Carlton. So this one I picked up because I had never read an H.D. Carlton, but this sounded interesting to me, and the cat and mouse duet is kind of intimidating since they're both so big, whereas this one is only like, is less than 300 pages. So I figured it's an easy way to sample her writing style. In hindsight, that was not a good idea, because this is very much connected to the cat and mouse duet. So this book, you follow Gigi and Ronaldo, And Gigi is in this unhappy marriage, and especially lately, he has just been doing some shitty things. Like he's gotten them into trouble, into debt. And on top of that, he also sexually assaults her. And then she starts noticing this mysterious, handsome stranger just watching her. Eventually, he enters and they eventually end up having like this secret affair. He's in the mafia, and the reason he was initially there is to keep an eye out for the husband because he was owing money to the mafia. But he became obsessed with the wife, like right away. Like her black hair, blue eyes, red lipstick. He immediately became intrigued. And she, since she was already in this unhappy marriage, found him to be sexy and mysterious. And they had this affair. And that is basically the entire story. Like at one point, it's just basically him waiting for her husband to leave so he can come in to fuck her. And that was basically the story over and over and over again. I really don't think this will do anything for you if you've not read The Cat and Mouse Duet. I think if you've read that and was really intrigued by Gigi's story, then you might really love this. But for me, it wasn't it. I gave it 3 stars. In hindsight, that might have been a little bit too generous. But there were some things I did enjoy about it. It was compulsively readable. Like it didn't take me too long. And even though I despise cheating romances, I felt like she did a good job with this one, since the reasonings made sense. The time period, because this is a historical romance, technically it takes place in the 1940s. It makes sense why she was unable to leave her husband. Whereas in cheating romances that take place in contemporary times, you cannot convince me that you cannot leave, because like in most cases you can. So there's really no need to cheat. This case, I did understand. I was rooting for her, but at the end of the day, I just didn't believe in their romance because I didn't feel like they loved each other for something that was uniquely theirs. What I mean by that is, if he had staked out another guy and he had an equally gorgeous wife, he would have stalked her and fallen in love with her. And same for her. In another scenario where she was in this unhappy marriage and this mysterious handsome stranger was stalking her, she would have also fallen in love with him. So she never convinced me why Gigi specifically loved Ronaldo, and she never really convinced me why Ronaldo specifically loved Gigi. And the main reason is that Gigi really didn't have a personality. Like her personality was wearing red lipstick, loving gothic things, and being a mother. That was her, like those 3 things were her entire personality. So I didn't really find myself rooting too much about these 2. And it also didn't really have a satisfying ending. But I think that's because you have had to have read The Cat and Mouse Duet, because I think that is where you'll find out the ending to their story. But 3 stars. I wouldn't recommend it if you have not read The Cat and Mouse Duet. The 4-star reads, the first one is a quick one. It's Gloria by Sierra Simone. This is the epilogue novella of Sinner. So I cannot really tell you a whole lot about this epilogue. It's basically a little bit more of the HEA between Sean and Zenny. So in Sinner by Sierra Simone, he falls in love with her even though she is becoming a nun. And this is basically like a little sneak peek into their married life. It was fine. I enjoyed it. I gave it the same rating I gave Sinner, but I don't really think it's that necessary to read. Next is The Situationship by Abby Jimenez. So the reason I read this book is first of all, Just for the Summer is one of my favorite books of all time. And if you watch the vlog I read that book in, which I'll leave that linked for you, I was so upset that the bonus chapter of Her Best Friend was not included. So when this one became available to buy on ebook and read it, I thought I was gonna love it, but I think I read it too late. Like I think I would have absolutely adored it had I read it right after Just for the Summer. But since like it was 7 months later, I kind of, even though Just for the Summer is my favorite book I read last year, I hadn't reread it and I kind of forgotten things about the side characters. So in that case, it didn't hit me as hard had I read it right after Just for the Summer. So I gave it 4 stars. It was enjoyable, but it's not really like, it's just like a meet cute between these 2. So I think my plan is to reread this once I actually reread Just for the Summer, and maybe it will hit me a little bit differently. But it's not like, I don't know if I would have given it 5 stars if I had read it right away, because this is not a full-length novel at all. It's like I said, it's mainly just a meet cute. But I was interested enough that I was upset that it wasn't included in my edition. You know what I mean? Like I remember ranting about the fact that I hate that these authors put in these bonus chapters for exclusive editions that you only can get in the US. Like I would have bought it if I lived in the US. Since I don't live there, I have literally no access to a bonus chapter like that. Obviously, I didn't know that it was gonna come out 6 months later, but anyway, 4 stars, and it's the romance between, if you're wondering, between Maddie and Doug. And it's not even a novella, it's a short story, but it was like hilarious and cute. And I really liked learning a little bit more about Doug because Doug has kind of been like the butt of the joke, especially in the first book in this series. So I liked that he got his own HCA and we got a little bit more of a different side to him. The other 4-star read was Spark of the Everflame. This one I read for the BookTube's favorite romances and romantasy, so I'll leave that linked for you. So I'll go into more of more thoughts, still non-spoilery. So this is the first book in the Kindred's Curse saga, and in this world you have humans and you have descendants, and descendants are descended from humans and gods, and they don't mix. Like it's illegal for a human and a descendant to have a baby together, and they're definitely different species. So humans are just like us, but they only have brown eyes, and descendants have all sorts of colored eyes. Their skin is impenetrable, and they're kind of described like when she actually goes into a descendant town, it kind of gets described as district, like as the first district in the Hunger Games. So think like that kind of extravagance. And DM, our main character, her mother has kept her away from descendants her entire life, but her mother has disappeared, and DM now has become the healer to the descendants, like to the royal descendants. And there she comes in contact with Luther, who is basically the heir to the throne. He's very powerful, and she kind of doesn't treat him like everybody else. Like she kind of insults him a lot of the time, and she doesn't bow at his feet, and he is intrigued by that. And she really is trying to figure out what happened to her mom, and there's also something else going on about her. There's something different about her, and she's also trying to figure out what that is. There's also a rebellion brewing that she also is dipping her toe in. This is definitely a setup book. I gave it 4 stars. I have heard from a lot of people that the second book and the third book are much better. The romance has started developing here, but it's definitely not established at all. So I enjoyed it, but as you see in that vlog, I read it in one day. So maybe if I'd taken my time with it, I would have enjoyed it more. But DM was annoying me a lot in this book. She is a character that is very rash and impulsive, and even though I like feisty heroines, I also really like smart heroines who think about their decisions, and she really doesn't do that. So I kind of had issues with her. So I think this is going to be similar to a lot of fantasy series that I know and love. I think the first book is very much a setup book. I don't think it's going to be my favorite in the series. I think other books in the series are going to be my favorite, but it was a solid first book in the series, and I did enjoy my time reading it. My other 4-star read I also read in that same vlog, and it's Powerless by Lauren Robert. This is also a world where you have like 2 different species, even though they're both humans. You have the elites and the ordinaries. Basically, like years ago, this disease swept through their lands, and the survivors of the disease, most of them got these abilities, and you have all sorts of abilities. Let me read you some. Oh, it doesn't say here. Anyway, doesn't matter. And the king thinks that ordinaries make the elites weaker. So anytime an elite gets in contact with an ordinary, their power will be weakened. So he has decreed that every ordinary has to be executed. And he has 2 sons, the heir to the throne and the enforcer. And basically the enforcer is, one of his tasks is to find these ordinaries and kill them. And Kai is his name, and Kit is the heir, and Payton is an ordinary, but she has been living as an elite her entire life. Like her father has trained her to pretend that she's a psychic. So he has basically trained her to really, really, really notice subtleties, so that once she gives that back to people, it seems like she's reading their mind when really she's noticing all these little things about them. And one day she actually saves Kai. And because she does that, she gets entered into this trial, a Hunger Games-like trial that the elites enter into, and very brutal, so usually only a few survive. And Kai also is joining this trial to kind of prove his abilities as an enforcer. And because of that, she has to go to the castle, and there are all these different balls. And of course, Kai teaches her to dance, and they really get close during the trials. And this has basically, just think of like all your favorite fantasy romance tropes, and this one has it in it. There's a who did this to you scene. There are several caretaking scenes. There's dancing lessons. There's a hair braiding scene. Like a lot of those things we love are in here. And I think that's why I gave it 4 stars, because I feel like she crammed all that in, and it didn't, as much as I loved the book, I thought their banter was amazing. If you watch the vlog, you'll see me giggling and kicking my feet about these two. I do feel like if you really look at it, it's not that, first of all, it's not that original, which a lot of people compare it to the Red Queen. I think she also took some things from the Young Elites, but also I feel like she just had this list of things she normally really loves in books and crammed it all in this first book. I feel like she should have paced that out, or she could have said, okay, we don't need like 3 different ball scenes, you know, I can't cut that down to just one, you know what I mean? So the end of the day, even though I did love it, I did really enjoy Kai and Peyton together. It felt a tad bit too long. I think this needed a little bit of editing. I think I would have loved it if that was the case. I think I could have given it 5 stars, but I loved it enough to get like the new special editions with the illustrations. So it was like one of my higher rated 4 stars. And the last 4 star was actually a reread, The Warlord Once Forever by Cressley Cole. So I'm gonna try it. I'm not sure if I'm gonna succeed, but I really wanna reread the Immortals After Dark series this year, and I wanna reread them all. But like I said, I don't know if I can succeed with that, but I did reread The Warlord Once Forever. I gave it 4 stars the first time around, and I'm still giving it 4 stars. This is definitely one of my least favorite in the series. I do feel like Cressley Cole, I don't really tend to absolutely love her novellas. I definitely much prefer her full-length novels. In this book, you follow Nikolai, who's a vampire, and Mist. And she's a Valkyrie. He finds her at this castle because she has been taken by this vampire king. And there's basically, in this world, you have 2 types of vampires. The ones you can think of, like normal vampires that drink from humans and are definitely very much usually evil. And you have the forebearers who don't want to drink from human blood, because in this world, if you drink a human to death, you will absorb their memories, and that will inevitably drive you insane. And Nikolai is one of those forebearers. He doesn't drink from human blood, or he doesn't drink from humans, or not directly from the vein. And he sees Mist, and they have this interaction. And then in this world, basically it all deals with fated mates, usually fated mates where you think, how are they going to get together? Like, how is this going to work? And each species will have a different reaction to finding their fated mates. And for vampires, they cannot get hard unless they meet their fated mate, and then they do. So she bloods him, meaning he gets hard for the first time and his heart starts beating. But Mist decides, so right around the time he actually gets hard, she kind of seduces him a little bit, and then she leaves. But the problem is that he cannot relieve his ache without his fated mate. So he's been walking around with a hard-on for 5 years, never being able to like relieve himself. So it's basically 5 years of torture until he sees her again in New Orleans, where she lives. And then he decides to get revenge by taking her and kind of giving her like a slice of the torture that she gave him. And it's gonna be their romance. Even though, like, I feel like he was well within his rights to kidnap her. And I know a lot of people kind of have issues with it because they've definitely very much dubious consent. But I mean, that part didn't really bother me. I feel like we just needed more pages with these two. At the end of the day, yes, am I convinced that they're in love? Yes. But is this my favorite couple? No. And I don't think it ever will be. But it was enjoyable. I do really love her writing style. I love her enemies to lovers romances. But this, it definitely very much reads like it was one of her first books published, or first books in the series. So there were some things that happened that I question as far as the lore is concerned. but it was enjoyable enough. And I wouldn't recommend this one as your first book to read in this series, even though technically it's a prequel. I would 100% suggest starting with A Hunger Like No Other, which hopefully I can get around to that this month, but we'll see. Now for my 5-star reads. The first one is a novella, and it's Under One Roof by Ali Hazelwood. So this is the first book in her feminist novellas, and you can read those novellas in any which order, but I just started it since in like the bind up, it's the first one. And this is a roommates to lovers trope, finding hero trope, which I love those two things. So you follow Mara. She had this mentor who was almost family, since she doesn't really have a good relationship with her family. And when her mentor dies, she leaves her half of the house that she owns. So basically, there's this house, and her mentor owned half of the house, and her nephew owned the other half. So now her half of the house is going to Mara. So when Mara shows up, she finds this attractive guy, and he tells her, once he finds out who she is, he tells her that he doesn't want her to live there and that he wants to buy her out. And no matter how much money he throws at her, she declines, because she feels like she just wants to feel close to her mentor, and that is obviously her house. They are at odds because she's an environmental engineer and he is a lawyer working for this big company that constantly pollutes the world, I guess. And this basically takes place in the span of a month, where they first meet and eventually they get together. And it starts in an interesting way because you actually see them kiss for the first time. Like, that's the prologue. And then you see what happened like 4 months before, 3.5 months before. And I really like that. I think it was an excellent novella. Yes, could we have spent more time, more pages on them? Yes, but I feel like this was a well-rounded story. It told the entire story. Yes, I love seeing actual couples together in my books, but for a novella, this did an excellent job. I wouldn't want anything else in a novella. And it wasn't even that long a novella, like it was like a 120 pages. But I feel like we got a well-rounded story. I love these two. I love a good roommate to lovers. I think this was an excellent roommates to lovers. I love how they went from hate to really becoming friends and then eventually becoming a romance. I think like this felt very realistic, like it could happen in real life, how you can not like each other and then you have a truce and then you start slowly seeing things from the other person's perspective. So I did definitely enjoy it. And I liked seeing the other two characters we're going to follow in this series. So very much looking forward to reading the rest of these novellas. My next 5-star read is The Crimson Moth by Kristen Cicerelli. Once again, I read it for my booktuber favorites and I gave this one 5 stars. So this one is also called The Heartless Hunter. So in the US, you'll find it under the Heartless Hunter name, and in the UK and I guess in the Netherlands, you'll find it under the Crimson Moth book. The series is called The Crimson Moth. So this is a witch and a witch hunter falling in love. So you follow Rune and Gideon. And basically, this world used to be ruled by witches until 2 years ago. Gideon and his brother started the revolution and killed the witch queens. And now witches have been hunted down and executed for 2 years. But every once in a while, they get saved by the Crimson Moth. And Gideon strongly suspects that it's Rune who's the Crimson Moth, which she is. And both of them are trying to seduce the other one to get their secrets because Rune needs him for information to save witches. And she's a secret witch because in this world, how you can tell somebody's a witch is that they have these casting scars. And the way you get these casting scars is anytime you cut yourself to use your blood in a spell, your scar will turn silver, which creates a casting scar, and it's their romance. And this was thoroughly entertaining. Like, I was engrossed the whole time. I was flipping the pages. I wanted to know what was going to happen. This is very much enemies to lovers. And at one point I'm like, how are you going to get together? And still, after reading this one, I'm so glad the second book is going to come out next month, because I am still so interested how she's going to give these two an HEA, because where we're at, I think that's impossible. And also not just give them an HEA, but get to a place where the world is going to be fine, because so much damage has already been done, both by the witches in the past and by these witch hunters. And even though, yes, it's only been 2 years that there's this new regime, like a lot of bad things can happen in 2 years. But I really loved the writing. I really enjoyed this romance, and it was thoroughly entertaining. And yes, it is young adult, but it leans more towards the older side of young adult. So they do have sex. They do talk about like difficult topics like sexual assault. But I really loved it. It was so good. And I would highly, highly recommend this book. And if you want to know more of my in-depth thoughts, check out my vlog. And the last book that I gave 5 stars, maybe my favorite book. Well, anyway, I just couldn't decide between these two, but it's One Dark Window. Once again, I read it for Booktuber's favorite. So that vlog was very successful for me. I had 2 4 stars and 2 5 stars. So very much agree with Booktube on a lot of books. But this is, it's marketed as a fantasy romance, but to me, it's definitely fantasy with a heavy romance subplot. You follow Elspeth, and in this world, you can use magic through these different cards. And they are called the Providence card. And basically, if you hold a card, you will have certain abilities, and each card has a different ability. And you have, I believe, 78 cards in total, and you have like 12 different type of abilities. So you have like 12 cards that are made 12 times. You have 12, like you have one type of card that was made 12 times, one type of card that was made 11 times, one type of card that was made 10 times, go so on and so forth, until you get to the Twin Elders card, which is this one. And that one was only made once. And that is the only legal way to use magic, is through these cards. If you're somehow magical in another way, like if you were born magical or if you became magical, well, no, in this world you could, similar to Powerless, you can become magical if you got sick, if you got this fever and survived it, then you become magical. And the king has been hunting down these children because he wants to either use them or execute them. And Elspeth is one of those people that is magical because she had this fever, but her father and her aunt immediately swept her away and healed her, and therefore nobody really knows that. And she actually gets swept into this plot of the king's nephew who wants to beat his uncle in finding a set of these cards, because whoever gets this set can request something from like this magical wood that is kind of haunting their land. So they have this magical woods, this misty woods that slowly creeps into the town. If you have one of these sets, you can remove this mist, and the king wants to do that. But you can also cure people who have had this fever and now magical abilities, because in this world, magic has real and severe consequences. Not just the cards, because every card, even though you get abilities, if you use it too much, there will be a consequence. So for example, there's a card where you can read minds, but if you use it too much, or no, there's a card where you can become invisible, I think, but if you use it too much, you can see ghosts, which will slowly drive you insane. And the same goes for these kids with these magical abilities. Eventually, all of them will deteriorate in some way. And she, like I said, she gets involved in this plot of the king's nephew to get one of those sets of cards, and he wants to use her because she actually can see the Providence cards. The reason she can is because she has this monster living inside her brain. And that is one thing I love. I always love in books when a character is kind of haunted by something else and there's something or someone talking in their heads. I loved it in Fourth Wing, I loved it in Wolf Gone Wild, and I really loved it here. So this is a romance between her and the king's nephew, Raven. And like I said, yes, there's a romance, but it doesn't, like, you can still, if there was not a romance here, you could, like, the book would still be the same. So that is why I don't think this is a fantasy romance. With fantasy romance or romantasy, the book is unreadable without the romance. This book you could definitely read still, like the plot is still the same without the romance. I definitely enjoyed it. It leaves off on a cliffhanger. So my plan is to read the sequel as soon as I can. So the plan was to read it in February. Hopefully I can still do that, but very excited. If you want to know more of my in-depth thoughts, check out that vlog. So those were the last 10 books I read. Definitely let me know in the comments below if you read any of these books and what your thoughts were. Also, what do you think of this new format? Leave all your thoughts down below. If you're down there, leave me some sort of card emoji if there is one. And I also would really love to know what was your favorite book you read in January, because this is gonna go up towards the end of January. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know by leaving a like if you did, and thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.